This is Dateline News and Conversation. The topic tonight is Navalny. He's a scoundrel who's serving time in Russian prison right now for fraud, embezzlement. But just this month, a film made about him won an Oscar. Now, I don't follow, and I never have followed these Oscars and these celebrity shows, but I read a report about it, and I really kind of felt a little bit of anger, but complete understanding that for this scoundrel to win an award at the Oscars had to have been what I believe to be a CIA inspired, directed, produced, funded film. I don't know, but my guest tonight, she's been on the show before. She exposed the maybe the world's best con artist, is what she called him, Bill Browder, on a show we did back in December. Tonight, Lucy Komisar, an investigative journalist, is with us tonight to talk about this Navalny Oscar winning film and exposing it as a fraud. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, you've done some incredible work over your lifetime, and I am particularly and have been particularly interested in the Bill Browder story because I've covered that and I learned about it several years ago, of course. And he is another convicted criminal for embezzling lots and lots of money. Both of these people hate Vladimir Putin and Russia, I think. So, Lucy, your story, and according to your story, you allege that this film is a fake and it is complete disinformation. Okay. Can you give us the background to the making of this film? What is it about? Because I haven't seen it, and I don't plan to, because I think I would be just repulsed.
You would. Actually, you have to have a strong drink next to you if you watch this film.
Yeah. Who were the authors of this film, and then who is this guy Navalny?
Well, the film, which is called Navalny, is about Alexei Navalny. And the film says, with no evidence, that he was poisoned with Novichok by Russian security agents in Siberia. He was then the Russians allowed him to fly to Germany. He was first taken care of in a hospital in Russia, and then he was flown to Germany. When he returned to Russia, he was arrested, and I'll talk about the reason for that. The people that are credited as the authors of the film are a man named Daniel Rohr, Canadian. He admits he never visited Russia, and he doesn't speak Russian. The Bulgarian Christo Grozev of Bellingcat. Now, that is an organization that is very hostile to Russia. It is financed by, and they admit it, by the governments of the US, the UK, and Europe. They did the initial investigation, and that's admitted also because they first posted articles on CNN even before the film was made. And though Rohr is claimed as the filmmaker, and the other person was the Russian Maria Pevchik. She worked for Navalny's organization, but she has lived mostly outside Russia since 2006. In 2019, she got a British passport, and she, like the people of Bellingcat, she has documented connections to the UK government. So what I think, without having the evidence, circumstantial evidence is this film was made and edited in Langley, or maybe by the MI6, but those are the people behind it.
Okay. Um, it's really interesting, that this film came out at this particular time and was produced by these foreigners. And it won, I guess, as the best foreign documentary film.
Just best documentary.
Yeah.
Um, the question that they're foreign is not relevant. The question is that all through the film they lie.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
you wanted to know more about Navalny, so let me tell you about that. Because based on what we know about him, he was groomed by the Americans. He has very strong Washington ties. He was a 2009, 2010 fellow of the Open Society Foundations, which are run by George Soros. And then he graduated from the Yale Fellowship, Washington Yale World Fellows. It had been called the White House Fellows under Bill Clinton, and then it continued, and it was still led by somebody from the Clinton presidency. So this was an organization, is an organization that grooms young people to go out and do carry out the Washington line. Now, when he went back after being in Washington for a couple of years, uh, he note he had started in 2007 an organization called NORAD, which was a racist anti-migrant activities organization, the National Russian Liberation Movement, and it was part of it was one of its allies in the group was a movement against illegal immigration, and that was a far right organization. In addition to targeting Russians from ethnic minorities, it targeted sexual minorities, and the people involved were people who said that the people who were not ethnic Russians were terrible people. Basically, they were a racist, nationalist right, and Navalny was completely involved with them, but it didn't seem to stop his invitations by the Soros organization or the Yale organization. But to get an idea of it, I think you should. There's a very brief video in which he is the star. It's less than a minute, but I think you should run that so people get an idea of who this Navalny is and what the Soros organization and the Yale fellows, who they were inviting, because this was on YouTube, so they would have known about it.
yeah, I will include that short video clip about Navalny um, expressing horrible racist views
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
talking about exterminating and killing people who are not pure Russian
Mm-hmm.
Slavics,
Now,
whatever.
the group, the Narod, which is Navalny's group, stopped operating in 2011 because that was the year the Supreme Court of Russia declared its partner an extremist organization and banned it. Now, at the time, the statement by Navalny was that his organization had organizationally failed, but formulated the correct line, meaning the racist. A correct platform, he said. That was the racist platform. In the film, Daniel Rohr, the director, says that Navalny, he has to mention this because it's known, that he had flirted with the extreme right. Now, flirted, if you see the film, looks like that that flirtation to me looked like a pretty solid marriage. And he explains in the film when he's asked about it, well, that he was creating a coalition, a broader coalition, and he had to talk to anybody. And anyway, they were Russian citizens. And so when he came back from his sojourn in Washington, um, there's more about him, which he he started an anti-corruption organization, and this was endorsed by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's huge. And we can talk about that a little bit more. Uh, I've been coming here since 2016, and it's been a total of 3 trips. And then I moved here to Crimea and Yalta 3 years ago in March. So I know about Navalny's reputation here. The people here are very much aware of him. And I have talked to many people about Navalny, what they think. His popularity, and I know that you know this, is somewhere around maybe 1%, maybe 2%, depending on what poll you look at. So um, his reputation here is insignificant. People know that he was a criminal, that he extorted money or embezzled money, whatever it is. Um, but tell me a little bit more about what you know and what you found out about this character.
This was the reason he was arrested is never written about in the Western press. It was a big investigation for me sitting in New York to find out why was he arrested. Well, this is why he was arrested. In 2008, the state-owned Russian post, the post office, decided to end collecting parcels from clients' distribution centers. That means that instead of some company taking its packages to the post office would pick them up at the company's site, at its warehouse or distribution site. Then they decided not to continue with this service. The clients would have to manage to get their packages to the post office in some other way. Alek Navalny, who is Alexei's brother, worked for the post office in a high-level position, and he found out what was going on, and he figured out how they could take advantage of that. He persuaded several companies to shift to the privately owned chief subscription agency. He did not reveal that this was a company that he, Alexei, and their parents, had just set up in the tax haven of Cyprus. Why go to Cyprus? Because that's where you can keep secret who owns a company and where the money is going. Later, Yves Rocher Vostok, that's the Russian part of the French cosmetics company, discovered this. And they've said, they complained, they ended up filing a lawsuit, that they were deprived of free choice. Plus, this company, GPA, the Navalny company, was using subcontractors because they weren't doing the work themselves. They were just a shell, which charged half as much as what was paid to GPA. And the Navalny cutout kept the difference as profit. And there was not only a complaint in Russia, but Yves Rocher filed a complaint in France. And in the end, the court saw that this was a corrupt deal by this anti-corruption fighter, and that they gave Alexei a suspended sentence of 3.5 years, and his brother Alek a prison sentence of the same term. Interesting that when I looked further about this, I looked into the European Court on Human Rights, and there had been a complaint filed against the Russians, and they said, by all accounts, GPA, the Navalny company, was set up for profit making, and the applicants pursued the same goal as any other commercial entity. So, in spite of the questionable inside information that these new capitalists traded on, the European Court deemed it not a crime because that is how business is done. But it's still an ethics problem because the fighter against corruption was making money off secret, non-public information. And some people think that making money off such insider dealing is unethical. Now, Western media depicted the trial as a sham instigated by Vladimir Putin. Well, as far as I know, Vladimir Putin does not run Yves Rocher, and they never reported the details of the case. Now, when Navalny violated his parole. He was in Germany, but he did not go back after he became well enough to do so. He stayed for 3 months. So therefore, he had violated his parole. The U.S. court rules for violation would not be different. Different if you are in prison, if you are given um, a sentence which keeps you out of prison, but you have to follow the rules of the parole, and you don't follow the rules, you go into prison, and that's why he's in prison. But of course, that is not reported.
Well, you have clarified, and I think given quite a bit of evidence that Navalny was groomed by the CIA. I mean, might as well come right out and say it.
Well,
George Soros.
Washington, no, we don't know who did it, but he was groomed by Washington. Hillary Clinton was probably obviously involved in it. She supported him when he went back to Russia, and Soros and the other organization are used for that purpose.
So you pointed out that the United States grooms people like Navalny and many others in uh, maybe Ivy League universities or other places to go into other countries, and in this case, Navalny, back into Russia. Russia, a major target, if not the major target of the United States.
Mhm.
They've had all kinds of NGOs in here and trying to uh, advance democracy, but really undermining local authority, trying to bring about regime change, trying to stir up the local population and turn them against the government. This is what Navalny is known for. Um, when he returned, as you mentioned, because he violated his parole, he was immediately arrested. And then what happened?
Well, he was imprisoned. I mean, that's what happens when you get when you get off prison, when you're free, you have to obey the parole rules. So he was put back in prison, and now, of course, he again is claiming that he's a victim. He's not talking about violating his parole. He's not talking about why he was convicted in the first place. And but you had indicated he does not have support in Russia. There was the Levada poll is a very respected poll, even by the West. They believe what it says. And they ran a poll of who would be supported for leader of the country, for president, over a number of years. And in each case, he got 1 or 2%. That's it. He was under the nationalists and he was under the communists. And of course, Putin was very high in popularity. But he doesn't have support. Probably some of the people there know about his nationalist activity. One of the people I communicated with, who I've known for a number of years, in fact, Eric Kraus, he's from France. He's a Frenchman, and he's a financial analyst, strategist. He's worked in Moscow since 1997, knows it very well. And he wrote to me that Navalny was the supreme political opportunist. And this is talking about the current time. He says, in Moscow, speaking in English to an audience of Western fund managers and journalists, he is the squeaky clean liberal Navalny, full of free markets, diversity, and social justice. Hearing him a few months later in Siberia, speaking in Russian, one encounters an entirely different animal, fiercely nationalistic, angry, somewhat racist. There, his slogan is kick out the thieves, but especially Russia for the ethnic Russians. Anyone without Slavic blood, especially immigrants from the Caucasus, are second-class citizens. So Navalny has not changed. This, of course, is not written about in the Western media, but he's basically a spokesperson for the American and UK deep states. He doesn't represent anything in Russia. 1 and 2% is minuscule, but that's the truth. Is you have to go to the facts to find out what the truth is, and that's of course essential. That's the essence of what's wrong with the film. It's a fabrication, but this sets out the cast of characters of the fabrication.
Well, I can tell you another reason why he's not very popular here in Russia. There are some 180 different ethnic groups in Russia uh, who are not quote unquote pure Russian. They've existed peacefully and harmoniously for centuries, really. Uh, and so for him to uh, portray himself as this Russian who wants to get rid of Putin, who wants to overthrow the government for all kinds of charges, it's really clear that he's not going to have a whole lot of support, especially in the outlying areas
Mhm.
where the majority of these ethnic groups reside and have for centuries. The other thing, I'd like to tell you and remind the audience, I have talked to a lot of people here about Navalny. The older people dismiss him immediately out of hand. He's just no credibility whatsoever. However, when I've talked to younger people, uh, the younger people, not very well educated, very impressionable, hear the story that there's corruption in the government, and there is. There's corruption everywhere, and it's Putin really can't correct a system as large as this one, where corruption has been there forever. And I'd have to say that when you look at the American government, that government is corrupted from the federal level all the way down through state levels. It's always been that. Well, it's yeah, always been that way. So um, he really doesn't have any support, any influence. He's not really affecting the political climate.
Mhm.
He is absolutely not a threat to Vladimir Putin. In fact, Putin doesn't have any interest in this character. He's got bigger things to worry about, and I think you would agree. Um, Now, I want to ask you that. Well, I'm going to ask you this question first. In the midst of all of this, he claims to be an opposition leader and a challenger to President Putin. Now, can you add any more to this in terms of his credibility, which would make him a serious contender to a president whose approval ratings is in the mid 80th percentile?
Mhm. Well, but see, him as an opposition leader is it's the same story as Guaido in Venezuela. This is somebody appointed by the U.S. He's not an opposition leader of Russians. He's a person who plays a role for the U.S. The purpose of Navalny as a hero and of the film Navalny is it's aimed at Americans. It has nothing to do with Russia. It's aimed at Americans. It's another part of Russia. It's Russia is a bad guy, and that's why we have to build up hostility and even threat of war. That's why we have to send billions to the Ukraine government. It's all about Russia. And Navalny is all about priming the American public to support the foreign policy, which is against Russia. Now, we know that this goes back decades. Cheney was talking about dismantling Russia, of making Russia into 5 different countries. And so this has been going on for quite some time. And people are talking in the Congress, some of the more demented people on the scale of a lot of dementia and dementedness talk about dismantling Russia, ending the presidency of Putin, and so on. All of this about Navalny and about the film is aimed at the American public, totally aimed at, or the British public in the case of the film that got a NAFTA, which is like the Oscar, a NAFTA award there. It's aimed at Western publics, full stop.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Zelensky because the timing of this film uh, coincides perfectly with Zelensky coming to the United States, meeting with Biden, addressing the Congress, getting all kinds of accolades and promises, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's this film about Navalny uh, winning the Oscars. Now, there isn't anybody in the United States really that has a television or a radio or a newspaper can escape these two stories. They just can't. They're so
Mhm.
huge and so obvious. Um, and I'm really glad that you brought up Zelensky and Navalny, really in the same
Mhm.
breath, uh, because this really is American vicious, malicious propaganda against Russia.
Mhm.
It always is. And you mentioned going back to Cheney. I did a film. Uh, it's called "Who Are These Russians and Why Do We Hate Them?" That actually I could have gone back prior to 1945, but with Harry Truman dropping the bombs on Hiroshima was a message
Mhm.
to Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union that we're the boss. We've got this bomb, this weapon. Ronald Reagan, and I'm sure you know this, probably did more than anybody to demonize Russia when he called them the evil empire, the soulless country, the red menace. And that has stuck in people's mind ever since. So, this anti communism, anti Soviet Union, anti Russia has been going on, in my opinion, in the United States at least since 1945. And as you mentioned, the purpose is to overthrow President Putin and to break up and balkanize the country to steal its resources. George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton in the 1990s were unsuccessful in finishing the job, the shock therapy on the Russian economy with Boris Yeltsin in power. And that came to an abrupt end when Vladimir Putin was elected in 2000, March of 2000. The last 23 years, the United States, the deep state in US and UK, with their vassals in Europe, have been doing everything they can to overthrow Putin and to break up Russia. This is just one last, I want to call it propaganda attempt, one last insult to Russia. It's not only political and economic, it's racist, I believe. I want your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's also an insult to America because they are propagandizing America. Americans are the target of this film, and the purpose is to get American support for the line of the government. And so but that's not the first time. You know, we there have been books written about how the deep state has used the film industry. The Pentagon has used the film industry, and therefore, we know this has been done before. We know from the Mockingbird investigation that the CIA paid off American journalists, hundreds of them, to promote the line. And I know we're not supposed to propagandize inside America, right? Well, it's done. And this is just another example. And again, people should understand the target of this is America, to support American foreign policy. That, of course, is why Navalny and many others are groomed by various supposedly independent projects to be inculcated with the American line and go back and promote it in whatever country they are. And this has been also going on for decades. So that is how people have to look at the film. Unfortunately, it is very slick, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But it is a very slick film, and people can't always see through what is being done uh, using Hollywood techniques.
All right. Uh, I want to get back to the film. And as we're talking about films in Hollywood and how the CIA has used it for decades, really, most of my life, that's for sure. Um, you talked about this film being really slick, exceptionally well produced. I haven't seen it and I won't, but
Mhm.
I would like you, and I think many of my viewers probably will never watch that film. Many of them probably don't watch the Oscars. I want to summarize. Uh, this film is a propaganda piece.
Mhm.
You've made it very clear that the audience is the United States and UK, European audiences. Um, it is exceptionally well done. And the purpose of the film, I'd like you to restate again. The purpose, beyond propaganda, what does it have to do with his role in Russia?
It's part of the purpose is to get sympathy for him and to put him as the opposition leader against an evil Putin who thinks he's so strong as an opposition leader that he tried to kill him. So that sets the stage. And he supposedly tried to kill him by having Secret Service people poison him when he was returning from a campaign trip in Siberia to Moscow. And now, two things which are not reported on in the West is that he had diabetes, and this is actually I found this a in a London business publication. Said Navalny had said in 2019 that he had diabetes. He also had allergies, and medically, uh, there is a connection between those two things and his collapse on the plane. Uh, and the information from the first place he went was taken to was the plane diverted on the decision of the pilot to a city in another city in Siberia, and he was taken to a hospital, and there was no Novichok found there, but he had various various issues that actually could be related to the illness that he had. Then he was taken to Berlin at the request of his wife, and the Russians said yes. And he went to the Charité hospital, and they did tests, and they didn't say they found Novichok. They found the same problems, which, as you can see, can be related to his illness. They said they found various problems. They didn't talk about a past illness because that was never acknowledged. But guess where the Novichok came from? 2 weeks after he arrived, the military uh, hospital, a military medical or research center, they announced that they had found Novichok. Now, the first group had put out the reports of what did they actually find and all kinds of medical listing. He had this in his blood and that and that and that. The military gave out zero information. Yes, Novichok. Any information? No, never. Any information. Full stop. Novichok. So that's the first part, which is not really not explained in the film, of course. But that's another part that you have to understand before you look at the film. That the only evidence was not evidence because there was. If you're going to give a report, you have to give evidence. This is what scientists are used to. They see charts and documents, and he had this percentage and that percentage. There was nothing, nothing. Uh, so, and of course, refused to give any information to Russia about this as well, accusing the Russians of poisoning him, but giving zero information on what was found by the military report.
Yeah, what I found interesting is that Russia even let him go to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it, it was probably a brilliant move. Let him go there because if we put him in our hospital and examined him, they wouldn't believe us. So,
Well, if he got better, that's true. Um,
yeah.
well, of
And
course,
you know
what
what?
they could have gotten other people to participate in the tests, but they just did. The wife said Germany, and that's what happened. And they just said, okay,
Yeah,
Germany. Um,
yeah,
and the cover up and the fake stories began from there.
yeah. Well, we'll pick up on that next week, but I want to ask you a couple more things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the film. I don't follow this, but just because it won an award, how influential do you think it's been in the United States? Forget about Europe right now. Just how influential and impactful do you think it's been in the United States?
Oh, it's just another drop that adds to the massive propaganda that is ongoing. Uh, First of all, not that many people will have seen it. It was obviously sent to the voters of the Oscars. It was shown at Sundance. It was shown at a screening that I went to, but it hasn't been put into movie theaters around the country. I don't know how many people would want to go to it. It's it's just part of the propaganda, and even if people don't see it, they will see what has been written about it, which is this is part of what the Russians have doing. Just as an example, and I don't know how this will turn out, but there's a website called Portside, port being the left side of the boat, and this is supposed to be the uh, a progressive internet site, which I've sometimes my articles have been posted there. They ran an article by someone, the son of the owner of the Moscow Times, which was a total Navalny propaganda article and repeating the lies. The Moscow Times, interesting, it's the owner is Dutch, and he just as an example, at a certain point, he was very critical of Khodorkovsky. Then Khodorkovsky bought a piece of Moscow Times, which suddenly stopped saying anything bad about Khodorkovsky. That is telling you about the Moscow Times. So he wrote a very this is a great film article all about terrible things that the Russians are doing. So I wrote to an editor who I've dealt with before saying, this is very one sided, and you should run my article, which gives the other side. He said, I'll send it to my editors. I have not heard from them yet, and maybe by next week I will have heard from them. But meanwhile, Portside, which pretends to speak to the progressive side of thought in America, has run only a really fake article about this. So we have a situation where publications that pretend to be on the left are part of this Russophobic group, this propagandistic Russophobic group.
Yeah. Uh, you told me something that I wasn't aware of, but I want to know. It hasn't been shown in theaters,
No, as far as I know, it has not been shown in theaters.
and that's incredible because uh, it's obvious that just getting the award and winning awards from Sundance and wherever else
Mhm.
was all fabricated. It had no intention, I think, no intention of persuading the American people about anything. Maybe it was just another one of those, as you mentioned, opportunities to propagandize the Americans for those who saw it. But that story is going to have little impact on Americans. I think the point was in your face, Russia. Navalny just won an Oscar.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it may take some time to get into theaters, and certainly winning an Oscar helps putting something into theaters. But the theaters also want to make money, so it's not only that it won an award. Do people really want to see this? And you just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I think that the people in Langley or whoever that are really behind this would like it to be in theaters. But
Okay.
that's whether or not they think that people will buy tickets.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see it as being a big moneymaker. I want to ask you this. Uh, your reporting uh, seemingly could get you in trouble with the deep state. Have you been attacked? Have
Only
you been?
verbally. I've gotten some nasty attacks uh, on my website and by email, some very nasty attacks, but you expect that.
So how widespread do you think it is? Have you been attacked like in the New York Times or the
Oh no,
Washington?
not personally. Oh, it's funny. I was attacked, and the article I wrote on which our conversation is based, I was attacked in Newsweek, and I contacted the editors and showed them all the parts of the article uh, it was, that were lies. I was attacked by somebody named Elliot Higgins, who is the founder of Bellingcat and who lives in the UK. And little by little, I showed them that everything he said was a lie. Oh, she does. She said that he had previous medical situations such as diabetes. She has no evidence. I linked to the report in a UK business website that says Navalny said he had diabetes, and Bellingcat says they don't get any government funding. Well, I linked to a place where they admit they get money from the National Endowment for Democracy, which we know is the follow-on to the CIA funding, and they get money from the European Union. So they had to run through the whole story and correct. At least they were willing to do that. Correct where Bellingcat, which was, and where Elliot Higgins, which is most of the article, was what Elliot Higgins said, and then the rest of it has to be. But Lucy Komisar says there's no evidence for that. He said this and this, and she shows that it's not true. So that was the other attack. If part of the problem with American journalism is some journalists are really not journalists; they're stenographers. And the person that ran this has been true, by the way, with the Bill Browder story. They don't check out anything. They're just stenographers. This person says this, we write it down. This person said, oh, it must be true. This person said it, we write it down. And that is a real problem. Part of it probably, because you don't know for each person, laziness, ignorance, maybe they're part of the team, which is, this is the line, and you have to be part of the team. I don't really know the reasons, but some of it is, if you write things that are not part of the line, you may not get your promotion because you have to be on the team. And the team is, in this case, you have to support what Navalny says, which now even extends to you have to support what Bellingcat says and not check out anything. It's a big either complicity or big failure of American journalism. But fortunately, editors at Newsweek were able to see that what I wrote was correct. I mean, this person that wrote the story, whose name I'm not going to mention because I'm more generous, said, and we sent her an email for her comment, full stop. That's the end. Didn't Lucy answer? I sent a note to her. Here is your email to me. It was at 10 a.m. Here's a copy of my answer. It was less than 3 hours later. How can you say I answered every question you raised? How can you suggest I didn't answer? So this is just sloppiness, stupidity. Was she doing it deliberately? I don't really know. But that's the other attack. That's more important than being attacked by somebody sending something very nasty in what's really a private email. They also do some nasty tweets. But again, it's more important for a supposedly reputable publication to copy their lies.
Well, you bring out a very important point about American journalism. It's non-existent. The mainstream media, all of them, and you mentioned all the reasons why these so-called journalists, stenographers do what they do. It's primarily a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before it's even a promotion, it's a paycheck. And so what they've done is they've sold their souls
Mm-hmm.
to the devil. They've sold out. They've lost their sense of conscience, lost their sense of right and wrong, lost their sense of honesty, and they just parrot the lines. And we know that from Operation Mockingbird, that
Mm-hmm.
the CIA has infiltrated the mainstream media in the United States now for many, many, many years.
And you could remind people that was a congressional investigation that revealed that. And Carl Bernstein did a very good article in Rolling Stone about that. If you put that in your search engine, Bernstein CIA, you'll come up with it.
Yeah. So this has been amazing, Lucy. This was just kind of an overview of the film Navalny. Next week, I want to get into more detail about the poisoning story. You alluded to it. This phone call. This is very interesting piece that really debunks this film. And you have a number of other, I think, incidences that prove that this film is a fake. And then you just mentioned you actually saw a screening of the film with the filmmakers. I am very looking forward to hearing about that particular
Mhm.
incident, and then we'll kind of summarize what the real purpose of this film was, and I'll look forward to that next week. And I just want to do my part uh, to help you and the rest of us get the word out about a number of things. Number one, the complicity of the mainstream media, the Oscars, and how they could give this film an Academy Award and what was the purpose.
That's the
Uh,
voters decide on that, though. It's not the management. It's the voters.
yeah,
The voters, there are probably 1,000 or more voters from the industry who decide on that.
yeah. But they're all controlled. They all know where the money's
Well, they
coming.
all get the same propaganda. They all have read the
Yeah.
same papers. Actually, I had sent my article to both the LA Times, because the film industry is their local industry, and the Hollywood Reporter, and neither of them was interested.